Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. My name is Steve Todd, and I serve as congregational president and today as part of the worship team. One thing I love about this congregation is the sense of energy and enthusiasm that is so often evident. And feeling that especially strongly this weekend as we had a wonderful session here yesterday to talk about the building expansion and all the other things that are going on now and coming in the future. I want to extend a very warm welcome to everyone who's visiting us for the first time. We are an intentional community gathered around our shared promise to support each other's individual spiritual journeys. We don't all believe the same things in exactly the same way, but we do share the same values and the same commitment to our spiritual growth. We share the faith that our beliefs become real when we act on them to make the world a better place. And we share the commitment to live a life grounded in community. If you are joining us online, please fill out a visitor form in the link in the description, and we'd love to connect with you. I mentioned yesterday's visioning session. I think we had 130 people registered. I didn't get a head count, but it was full. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. If you missed it, ask somebody about it. And for those of you who were there, in the Sky Room this morning, if you didn't catch this at the very end, there's a poster with a QR code. And you are invited to take a picture of that, get to that link on your phone, and then submit whatever feedback or suggestions or grand ideas that you have. It will be anonymous, so you can even be slightly negative if you need to be. Just a little. Our microaggressions workshop. No. Sorry. I don't plan my jokes like Ray does. They just happen. No connection. New topic. Our microaggressions workshop is finally here. Next Saturday from 1 to 4 in the Sky Room. Sign up online through the weekly messenger email or in the coffee hour after the service. And finally, I'd like to invite Jack Doggett, a Pledge Drive co-chair, to say a few words.
Thanks, Steve. One of the ways that we co-create this community is to make a commitment to one another once a year of our financial support for the congregation. Obvious stuff, staff, programs, and other things. So this is going on right now. For those of you who picked up your packets last week and made your pledges, thank you very much. For those of you who haven't, please see Susan and I in the foyer on your way out. We have a packet for you. And if you're new and haven't signed up and want a packet just to see it, then perhaps consider making a pledge. We have one of those ready for you as well. The second thing I wanted to ask about or tell you about is the congregation has a Google group meant for communicating amongst members important things. It's been very active lately. Several people have asked, how can I sign up? Well, it's going to be on the table out there on the foyer on the left as you go out. So please, if you're interested in getting this general communications from members of the congregation, please sign up. Thank you.
The chalice is the symbol of our liberal faith. It is the warmth of compassion, the fire of justice, a lamp on the spiritual path. If you're joining us online and have a chalice or a candle or an electric battery-powered facsimile, please get ready to light it with us. I'd like to invite Susan Secord to come up and light this morning's chalice.
Good morning. So as Steve said, my name is Susan Secord, and excuse me, I've been a member here since 2009, and I came here at a time in my life when a lot was about to change. Our son Benjamin was about to graduate from high school, and my husband and Chris would soon become empty nesters. And I also was planning to retire in the next 2 or 3 years from teaching at Bear Creek Elementary in South Boulder. So 2 very precious communities and connections to our broader community would be slipping away. So I came here in search of a new community dedicated to social justice, a community based in love, and a place where I could grow spiritually with others. And I found that here. I felt immediately welcomed and encouraged to get involved with the church, and I was soon part of a group birthing the Climate Action Ministry. And that group has been my through line of connection all these years. While I've also found other sources through the choir, through teaching in RE, and serving on the LDC and other opportunities. So when Jack asked me to co-lead this year's pledge drive, I was happy to join him in this really important part of being a member of this congregation. And during this time of working together, I've been reflecting on the 7th principle, the respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, but from a different angle. So caring for the earth and all of life is very much the focus of that principle, and that's near and dear to my heart. And it's actually the principle that drew me here. But what I've also been thinking about is how interdependence flows through time. So we're all here today because some of our faith ancestors brought Unitarianism and Universalism to America. But more personally, we're here today together because of the founders of this church. The founders had the vision to start UUCB and dedicated their time, talent, and treasure to carrying on the UU principles forward so that others could embody them as well. So we're here standing on their shoulders. They are part of our interdependent web. And each year we have the opportunity to pay their dedication and our own forward. Over the past 16 years since I've joined, there have been lots of changes in ministers, in staff, and in membership. What is constant is our dedication to our 7 principles and to living into our church mission to connect bravely, deepen spiritually, embody justice, and always love. In these fraught times, our mission and principles seem more important than ever. So we've also come through a pandemic together. And on the other side of that, we're now thriving and growing. It's so great to see so many new faces here every week, so many new friends I haven't yet met. And we've grown so much that we do need a new church building, and that's super exciting. And we will have the opportunity to donate financially to that later this year. But throughout our UUCB history, it's always been what happens inside the walls of this church building that counts. And that's what our annual pledge drive supports. In the service of our mission, you and I keep the lights on and our spaces heated. We provide the materials for worship and RE and coffee and the internet. And most importantly, we provide financial support for our truly extraordinary staff that supports all of us on our journey. So today I light this chalice in gratitude to our church founders and all they did to create this UUCB community, to all of us here today who are living into our church mission, and to those who will come after us who will carry our UU principles forward into a world that truly needs them.
Thank you, Susan. To covenant is to commit. To commit that even if we fall short of our aspirations, we will not let go of them. We will never cease from trying again to live them out. In that spirit, gathered in person and online, will you rise in body or in spirit to speak our covenant aloud together? We gather in fellowship to speak truth to each other, to reach out and touch one another, to care with each other, and to seek the truth divine. So be it.
The author and podcaster Krista Tippett says this about questions. She says, I would invite you to notice, to ponder what a powerful thing a question is, a mighty form of words. Here's how I have learned to experience it. Questions elicit answers in their likeness. Answers mirror the questions they rise or fall to meet. And it turns out it's not true what they taught us in school. There is such a thing as a bad question. She says, I've struggled with this, but I finally decided it's true. It's often true that a simple, honest question is just what's needed to drive to the heart of a matter. That's as true as ever. But also, it's hard to meet a simplistic question with anything but a simplistic answer. It's hard, almost impossible, to transcend a combative question. But I can state this positively, she says. It is hard to resist a generous question. And we can all formulate questions that invite honesty, dignity, revelation. And there's something redemptive and life-giving about asking a better question. Today is a question box sermon, which means instead of preaching, I'm going to answer on the spot without seeing them in advance any and all the questions that you have. Probably, in fact, you will have too many questions to answer, hopefully. But Rachel and Emily and I, anything we don't get to today, the three of us will answer in the weeks to come, and we'll post it on the church's YouTube channel. So more after today, too. So ask any questions you have about the church, about Unitarian Universalism, about theology, about me, whatever is on your mind. Someone reminded me this is not a stump the minister service, an easily achieved exercise, but a space for curiosity, for generous questions and generous answers. Put your question and your name on the card if you would. I won't share your name, but it's helpful. I like knowing who's got what on their minds. For us in person, you have a pencil and an index card when you came in. If you didn't, Robin and Laura, our ushers, can bring one. Raise your hand if you need a pencil and index card. Awesome. And then a little later in the service, when you keep your hands up if you need one, though. A little later in the service, when you come forward to place a stone, I'm going to have this basket here to collect them in. And even if you don't come forward, just give it to the person next to you who does, to drop it in. Folks online, you can post your questions in the chat. It won't be saved in the recording after the service. It'll be visible live. And then Bob and Janet, who are running AV, I'm going to have poke their heads back out later in the service if there are any questions posted that way. Oh, friends, it's good to be together. It's good to be a questioning people, to love the questions. And in that spirit, can I invite you to rise as you're able and join in singing a questioning sort of a song?
So this hymn was a surprise to me. In my time so far in Unitarian Universalism, I have not sung this, but it was a special request from Reverend David. And upon reading it and kind of steeping myself in the words, the things that are really beautiful about it are that it's full of questions, which is perfect for today, but also kind of approaches these questions from multiple perspectives. Theism, humanism, we're talking about nature, we're talking about community, but above all, just like Reverend David was talking about, it's full of mystery and wonder and these hints of mysticism that I think really set us up well for this whole service. So because the tune is a little unfamiliar, I asked Austin to play it once the whole way through. If you're a music reader, you can follow along. This is number 8 in your gray hymnal. Mother Spirit, Father Spirit, where are you? In the sky song, in the forest sounds your cry. What to give you, what to call you, what am I? Many drops are in the ocean deep and wide. Sunlight bounces off the ripples to the sky. What to give you, what to call you, who am I? I am empty, time flies from me. What is time? Dreams eternal, fears infernal haunt my heart. What to give you, what to call you, oh my God. Mother Spirit, Father Spirit, take our hearts. Take our breath and let our voices sing our parts. Take our hands and let us work to shape our art.
Join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation, spirit of stillness, spirit of listening to ourselves. We haven't done this quite this way before, but can I invite you just to shout out into the room, what is it that you need right now? What do you need inside yourself? Is it stillness, hope, comfort? What do you need? Hope, peace, assurance. Yeah. Yeah, goodness, thank you. I appreciate that. Take a breath with me. This is a house of memory and hope. And when we gather here in the quiet of this hour, in the stillness of this room, filled with the sound of our breath together, we're here to remember and we're here to hope together. We remember that no one of us can do everything by ourselves. No one of us can carry the full weight of grief or overwhelm of the world. No one of us can fix it all, can do it all, can make it through on our own. We're here to remember that we need each other, to remember the way that we're woven together in hope and in love, even with the people we don't know, we've never met, sitting in this room right now. Just for a moment, just for a breath, we're woven together, one single garment, strong, resilient. We're here to remember that we do need to take care not just of the world and each other, but of ourselves too. And that our work is to care for our bodies. And yes, go to bed a little earlier tonight. Yes. It is, because our bodies matter. And it matters to be in them and care for ourselves, to attach our own oxygen masks before we do on someone else. And we gather in this house to hope, to remember that difficulty, that grief, that suffering is real, and it's not the whole story. To remember that our work isn't to weigh all the good in the world against all the bad and see who's come out ahead, nor even to do that in our own lives with our own selves, but to hope also, to hold hope close. Not an expectation that everything's going to be fine, but a remembering that change is possible, that something else is possible, that a new world is possible, and we ourselves renewed as well. We're here to hope not just for the world and for ourselves, but each other. And on the days and in the times when it is too much for you to feel that way about yourself and your own life, well, here's 100 other people all around you to help carry it for you. Be together in silence for a few breaths. Amen. Ritual is an outward expression of an inward movement. And in spiritual practice, in ritual, it's practice because it's not just the thing we do once and are all done with it, as much as I would like the world to work that way. It's practice because we have to return again and again to the rhythms of remembering our joys and our sorrows, how they're woven together, how they're both true, how the limits of our own experience aren't the limits of our shared experience. And in placing stones to symbolize our joys and sorrows, we're gardeners of our hearts or our spirits, and it takes a gardener's patience to let your heart break open on its own time, teaching ourselves to recognize the hope and suffering woven into our daily living. In just a moment, for those meeting in person, I'll invite you to come forward as you feel moved, starting with the back of the room, then the sides, then the front, and silently to take a stone and feel its weight, feel your body slowly warm it, and let that stone be an emblem of your thankfulness, of your worry, both, of everything. And then place it in the sacred earth in the company of all the joys and sorrows of this community, not alone. This morning we hold in love Kate Frizzell. Yesterday afternoon we celebrated her life here with joy and tears and silliness and laughter, all of which was who she was and who we are for her now. We hold with deep appreciation the work of the visioning and expansion teams. It was such an exciting thing to start thinking about the design in the future, to plant a flag for hope. And we hold in deep love and tenderness Alice, who lost a dear friend this week, who loved life and danced on tabletops and brought joy to so many. That's ours now, to keep carrying forward. And for all the joys and sorrows we hold in silence, we make this space for each other, and I invite you to come forward as you feel moved. was partly organizing and partly just soaking it. This is the first time I've heard y'all play together, and it's just such a lovely sound. Thank you. I sorted them. I haven't looked at any of them yet. I'm going to start with two from folks online. One is a statement. Tracy from Oregon sends love and peace. Every week there's, 20 or 30 folks who are joining the live stream online, and then a whole bunch more. We get another 100 views or so in the next week. What that actually means for humans who have watched it, I'm not sure. But we are multi-platform, as it says. There's also a question online that says, we haven't had any dog stories lately. How is your dog? My dog is so good. So my dog, Pilot, is a Saint Bernard. He is 8.5 feet long from the nose to the tip of the tail and 175 pounds. And every ounce of that dog is just love for everyone and everything. Every time I meet another dog and pet it, I am amazed that its fur does not cover my entire body for weeks to come. He's such a sweetheart. He's getting older too. You know, those giant dogs. He's 6, headed towards 7, which is not old for a dog, but is older for a giant, and he's slowing down a little. But his big thing lately, I should not only tell you about my dog here, but his big thing lately is we have 3 cats, and the littlest cat, Binks, is I think about 2 years old now. Binks, who's this big, loves Pilot, and if Pilot is like laying down on the floor, this is not an exaggeration, Binks will come over and like flop down on top of him. Pilot believes that Binks is thoroughly in charge. So his approach to the cat is like, is this okay? Are you all right? It's extremely sweet and totally ridiculous. When describing UUCB to friends who are unfamiliar, I sometimes say church in air quotes. But they assume Jesus Christ, intolerance to LGBTQ folks, and so on. How do I explain briefly without preaching, and I think it means preaching, about UUCB? This is such a good question. I think it depends a lot on the context. And I sometimes think about, well, what is the context of the person that I'm talking with, and what do they know or not know about church? And then, or assume, and then how do I talk about this place in a way that makes sense? So, for someone who is steeped in another tradition, I'll say, well, our 11 o'clock service is pretty much like a standard Protestant worship service, except instead of biblical texts, we draw from many sources, and instead of traditional Christian hymns, we sing many different kinds of things, and we have all these different theologies in the room. And they'll sort of say, okay, that makes sense in terms of my experience. For someone who's unchurched or has this sort of negative understanding of it, I really lean into saying, naming that first off and saying, I know that when you hear me say church, you probably assume this and that and that. But here's the thing, it's not those things. What I talk about sometimes is Unitarian Universalism as a community that's gathered around shared values instead of a shared theology. Talk a little bit about what those values are, how they are sensible, reasonable values, and then talk a little bit about the range of theology that's in the room on any given morning, that you have theists sitting next to humanists, agnostics, earth-centered folks, Buddhists, spiritual but not religious. There's such this wide range. And often I'll say, most importantly, it's just not a church that says you have to believe a certain way or else. It's a community where everyone's on their own individual path, and we think we can do that better in community. Another way to answer that question, and probably every one of the questions that follows, is, I don't know, how would you do that? That's a good question to ask each other. Do any of you know where the architects are putting the copper doors? So in the building expansion. No, I don't think we've gotten that far yet, but it's a good question. They take really seriously and with a lot of love the history of the building, and their approach and intention is not, well, let's drywall over the stone and let's put the copper doors in storage. It's how do we make use of this stuff that tells some of the story of where we came from? Please discuss the influences, positive and negative, of 4th century Mesopotamian culture on Unitarian thought. Well, it's a good question, but because it doesn't specify BC or AD, I don't know that I can give the proper answer. I think it's submitted as a joke. I so want to answer it, though. But I'm not going to. It would be a stretch. I could make something up that sounds plausible, but so could you. How do we prevent our children from learning bullying and negative values from our country's leadership? So much, yeah. I think it's so alive. I think when I think about that in so many ways, part of what I think about is like, what's the sphere of influence that each one of us occupies? Like, what's the world in which we can control or help to shape, and what's the stuff that we can't? And in so many ways, I don't know that any one of us individually, right, can make that much of a difference on how our national leaders are acting and behaving, but I think we make a tremendous difference in the way that we interact and engage with each other. And I think that people learn kindness and respect. They learn compassion and empathy from being in relationship with the people around them who treat them that way. And I think that's true for little kids. And I think that's true for adults too, actually. I think we don't reach a point where, well, I'm done learning how to be kind. I either am or I'm not. This is like a lifelong process. And it's talking and being in relationship every day. I think about that. Kid comes home from school and has this negative experience. Well, let's talk about this and engage with this. What would you have wished that it was? What would you want to do in that situation? What might repair or healing look like? Also say too, I've been absolutely astonished at how my own kid's experience in school has been so radically different from mine. Like when I was a kid, and I bet this is true for folks older than me too, there was no conversation ever about bullying, about violence, about fight. There was none of that stuff. And that's been a feature of my kids' school experience. I'm sure that's not true everywhere, but that's given me a lot of hope. I don't think for either one of us, I don't think for anyone today, middle school is like a great, happy, fun time. But it's, I don't know, it was different. The depth of misery of it, I think, was different. That's a piece too. I don't know, your mileage may vary. What are your thoughts about UUCB being a church rather than a congregation, fellowship, or society? It's such a good question. I mean, church comes laden with so many associations to it. And especially for someone who grew up with really negative connotations to that, whether you're coming out of a tradition where church was sort of wielded as a weapon and was traumatizing, whether you're unchurched and the word church just sort of sounds still a little weird. What is this thing again? Or I also think about folks raised Jewish who have become Unitarian Universalist, for whom it's never not going to feel weird to be in a building called church, no matter how far they've come out of that tradition. So there's all of that. And then also, man, like, if you come into this service, this is clearly a church service. Like, the shape of it is churchy. So, there's another, in the past, there was a movement a while back where Universalist churches were founded called All Souls, with this idea that they were for all souls, and it'd just be All Souls Congregation. This is a great name. There is another All Souls church already in Boulder, so they beat us there. Yeah, so it's, the question didn't ask for a conclusion, just my thoughts. Those are my thoughts. How optimistic are you feeling these days? Yeah, that's how. I always, the writer Rebecca Solnit talks about hope as being something different from optimism or pessimism. She says, optimism means you think it's going to turn out well no matter what. Pessimism thinks it's going to turn out bad no matter what. And hope doesn't even enter that conversation. Hope says that something else is possible. There's a quote attributed to Maimonides that says, hope is the belief in the plausibility of the possible, rather than the way things are is inevitably the way they have to be. So I'm not optimistic these days. Like, I don't think things are going to turn out well no matter what. But I am deeply hopeful. Why do we put pronouns on our name tags? This is such a great question. So a little bit more than, was it 2 years ago now? Something like that. We switched up the way name tags are to have pronouns on all of them. And what we had heard from trans and non-binary and genderqueer folks in the congregation was, this is a way of signaling welcome, that we don't automatically assume the presentation that someone appears on first glance from the outside represents the gender that they are on the inside and know themselves to be. And in that, why not then just put it on the name tags of folks who do not sort of have that match? And the answer is because it matters for all of us, because it's a signal and a welcome, not to assume, not to expect. Even someone who presents super masculine or super feminine on the outside, that may not be how they understand themselves to be. And respecting their self-understanding as, what's a better way to frame that? I think that the way you understand yourself is much realer and truer than what I assume you to be. And I take that seriously. And so that name tag is a signal there. Y'all have great questions. What do you say to a federal retiree who may lose their retirement on March 14th? And then there's a follow-up here of how can they pledge, right? I think the first thing to say is this is an absurd timeline we're living on right now. This is ridiculous. And most of all, as people one to another and as a congregation, we're here to help. There's a minister's discretionary fund, and I use that regularly through the year to help folks out with a medical bill or rent or coat for the winter or whatever those things are that's needed. So don't hesitate to reach out if you're in need. We are very deliberately, let me give you a different entrance to this point. I think one of the things that we all internalize about the city of Boulder is that it is populated exclusively by wealthy people who are doing just fine, thank you. And while there are plenty of wealthy people in the city of Boulder, and that's great, also there are lots and lots of folks who are struggling. But I think, both in the larger culture, but especially in this place, there's like this internalized, stigma or shame or sense of like, I can't say something. I'm not supposed to be doing less than fine. And it's important to say that we are really deliberately a congregation of folks in all sorts of places in terms of finance and resources. And you're not only supposed to be here if you're doing fine, whether that's financially or any other way in your life. The abundance of this place comes from all of us together. Pledging financial support to the congregation, I always say, do not give until it hurts. That is weird and controlling and unhealthy. Give till it feels good and works for you and works for what your life is. And change it if it needs to change. A pledge is a best estimate. And regularly through the year, we'll get folks who reach out to the office either to say, hey, I thought I could do this, but actually I can do this, or I thought I can do this, but actually I can't. And every time we say, thank you so much for letting us know. There's plenty of time. There's just so much capacity. I dwell on this in part because I think that money is so often like this source of shame or guilt or this sense of I'm supposed to be something other than what I am, or that everything would be fine. If I just had a little more, everything would be fine. And man, it's just complicated. Let's just talk about it forthright and not do all of that guilt and shame stuff. I don't know if I answered the question, but at least that's how I navigate through it. It's redundant. What in your life background gave you the skill to use old ideas and develop them in a fresh way? That is so sweet of you. I don't know. My folks raised me well, I guess. Actually, this sounds like a canned answer, but it isn't. I think a big part of it actually was growing up in a Unitarian Universalist religious education program, where the idea was you engage with these stories, rituals, traditions, holidays, and instead of being told, here is the one singular meaning of what this is and what you're supposed to do with it, there's this invitation to curiosity and engagement. And then as a college student falling in love with the study of religion, that's like all the academic study of religion is. Let's look at this parable in 11 different ways for 400 pages. And you practice your way into it. And then there's this great line, Emerson this is such a nerdy thing to tell you, in his address to the graduating class of Harvard Divinity in, I think, 1836, says, go breathe new life into old forms. He says, it's not that the form of the thing is bad by itself, it's that it needs to actually be alive. That's what matters in it. Which Boulder area trail has your favorite spring flowers? Like my children and my pets, I love all Boulder area trails equally. How did you come to ministry? The seeds were planted as a kid in religious education, but I never seriously understood ministry as a thing like actual people do for a job that they do. And I went to college, and I fell in love with the study of religion. And Scotty McLennan, who was the chaplain of the college where I was and was a Unitarian Universalist minister, said, I was telling him, I was going to go to grad school and study religion. He said, well, it'd really be a shame not to be a minister. And that was the first time in my entire life that someone had said, well, yeah, have you thought about this? And it turns out for me, he was right, because I think that ministry gets to ask the really fun questions. Like the academic world gets to ask the how and the where and the what. And ministry, all of us together get to ask the so what questions. Like that's the thing that is exciting and energizing to me is, this thing happened in this village in southern France in the 11th century. I mean, that is very interesting. But so what is the fun stuff there? Goodness, I could do this for several more hours. We probably shouldn't. I'm going to answer a couple more of these, and then we'll wrap up, and I and Rachel and Emily will answer some more in the weeks ahead. When you were considering moving to a new UU congregation, what about this church attracted me? So UU ministers aren't assigned or sent. Churches aren't assigned ministers. We go through this elaborate matching process to find the right fit. And the simplest answer is, I think because this congregation does church in the way that I want to do church. And for me, what that means is y'all take community really seriously, that it matters to be connected and in relationship with each other. But also you don't overdo that. You don't have like this thing of, well, I'm supposed to be best friends with everybody. It's like, no, we respect everyone, and then you find your small communities and connections within the whole, and that matters a lot to you. But also at the same time, it's not just a club, because there's this other piece of genuine spiritual growth and practice. Like you take your spiritual lives seriously. And that looks wildly different for almost every person in this room. And that finds its expression through so many forms. And I just feel like that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing. Of course, that's what the work is. But also in that, you take the work seriously without taking yourselves too seriously. It's not that this is this great solemn thing, and now coming to church, I will perform my great wisdom or something like that. Like this, I don't know. Not just me, all of you don't do that. You take the work seriously without taking yourselves too seriously. And then this last piece of, it's a congregation who care. It's as if you're not in the room with me right now. You are a congregation who cares a lot about actually putting your values into practice. And sometimes that looks like activism and action and joining the 1,000 people in front of Noah and NIST last Monday and writing letters and advocacy work. And sometimes that looks like service work. But I think also you take seriously that putting your values into action isn't something that's just separate from everyday life. That very first question, that sense of putting your values into action looks like kindness, looks like respect, looks like repair when there's an ow or an oops in a relationship. And those aren't, I don't know, there's an everydayness to that that I think you all take seriously. And that's how I want to do church. Also, the music is really good. I can't answer that in the time that we have. I can't answer that either. That's too good. This is the sweetest thing. How can we take better care of you and your family? Man, you're going to make me cry up here. Wow. You do. I don't know if you know this about yourselves, but you do. I have a lot of friends and colleagues who overwork and run ragged and who do the work for the institution they serve at the cost of their health and their relationships and their families, and you don't. A mentor told me every year you should expect to really substantially disappoint people at least a few times. And every year I try to do that at least a few times. And instead of running me out of town, you say, yeah, okay, well, here we go. How do we repair? How do we move forward together? That's care. You don't have an expectation that I'm going to be available in the office anytime you drop by. Sometimes that's really annoying, right? Because it sure would be convenient. But like I leave most Mondays around 3 and I go home and work out before hang out with my kids and my family. Like that's taking care of me too, is making the space for that. And I'm grateful for it. Okay, I'm gonna do one more. This is an awesome question I'm not gonna answer. This week I've been thinking about the meaning of the Wizard of Oz. What comes to mind for you in the meaning of this story? Isn't that awesome? That's great. I'm not gonna answer it, but it's really good. Is it healthy to view the world through the lens of heartbreak? All right, I'll land with this one. The Quaker author and teacher Parker Palmer talks about 2 different ways that heartbreak can look. He says, your heart can break in the sense of bursting, of being destroyed, of being shredded. And he says, your heart can break open to the beauty of the world, to the fact of the complexity of the whole place, to the possibility of all of the people around you. And both of those things are heartbreak. And I don't mean to dodge this question by like giving you definitions. I think also, in Buddhism, the first noble truth is the reality of suffering. That suffering is inescapable. It's not something incidental. It's a feature of being alive. It's baked into the world. There's not a way around it. And sometimes expressing that, even in the context of the other 3 noble truths, there's this sense of like, oh, that's so pessimistic and awful. How do you live that way? But I think part of it, for me at least, though I make sense of that, is that heartbreak's not the whole story. I don't think it's healthy to live without any heartbreak at all. I think, there's some, what is it? Who's the guy who wrote the book about the guy who turns into a bug? Kafka. Kafka says you can cut yourself off from the sufferings of the world. This is a thing that you can do. But it may be that in cutting yourself off from the world that way, you're causing the one suffering you're otherwise able to prevent. There's this sense of, I think, of needing to be, I think healthy is knowing and facing heartbreak and knowing it's not the whole story. I actually think this is part of what, I'm not a Christian, but part of what like that Easter arc, I think, to me, articulates so beautifully, metaphorically, this idea of heartbreak, of loss, of suffering, of death, and also of possibility. I know there's probably a lot more meaning laden over that in a lot of other traditions. This is like a preview for next month. But it's that both and. Exclusively through the lens of heartbreak, I think, isn't seeing the whole of the world. And then also, sometimes that's the place we spend seasons of our lives. And that's okay too, When it's a season for grief and overwhelm, I don't think you get through that by pretending that's not the place that you are. You face it and metabolize it and move through it. And sometimes you just need to remember that that's not the whole story, and you don't believe it for one bit. You move through and carry that with you, I think. I love this questioning work. I really could do this for another hour. I should let you go and have some coffee and sing together first. I think the last thing to say, though, before we sing all together is this. The work of questioning and wrestling with this stuff is not mine. The thing that I just did, maybe for too long up here, is not because I have some special access or special experience. I may know more about 4th century Mesopotamian culture. I don't. But it's because this is all of our essential work. And I'm not sharing this because these are the right answers that you now have to go and all agree with, as much as to say, this is what all of us are engaged with. And the right thing to do with these questions is not just to save them for me one day out of 365, but to ask them to each other and to yourself, and to see how those answers change and change you. In that spirit of being a journeying people, a traveling people, a pilgrim people changed by the journey, we rise as you're able. Let's sing together.
We are the people of the living tradition. We are on a forever journey together, a journey with no destination and 1,000 destinations, and questions that persist at all times. But what we're journeying towards is this vision of something beautiful. So in that spirit, that's why we've chosen this fantastic song to sing today. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in justice land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There will be singing. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. So come and go with me last time. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound.
This month, half of our offering goes to wildlife restoration volunteers. We'll abbreviate that WRV. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, it says wildlife. Wildland Restoration Volunteers. They gave me a lot of information to share with you. I'm going to suggest that they're all over the place. It's all about everything is connected, and the interdependent web of life brings wholeness to ourselves and to our local environment. They partner with community organizations that recruit Latinx families in Commerce City, North Aurora, Lafayette, and Longmont, help to restore natural habitat in Rocky Mountain Arsenal and the National Wildlife Refuge and Bar Lake State Park, work with people in Commerce City, and all over the place. Residents and non-residents are volunteering to plant trees and pollinator-friendly, drought-resistant native plants, and working together to improve the environment. You can learn more about them. There will be a table in the Sky Room after the service. And also coming is a spring all-ages service project that you can be involved with directly. Your help, along with their partners, makes this effort possible. I invite you to give as generously as you are able. For those online, you can use the QR code or find a link in the video description. For those here in person, there's the QR link, or make a donation as the ushers pass the baskets. May our gifts be used to enact justice, bringing peace and love to the Boulder community.
As we close, invite you after the service today in the Sky Room. There's a whole bunch of tables. It's our church works fair, and all the groups and teams working behind the scenes to make the place run, the board, leadership development, OWL teachers, and on, have tables there. So go find out more as you get some food and coffee. But I'll share these words from the poet Rilke. He says, "Have patience with everything unresolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. Don't search for the answers which could not be given to you now, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps then, someday, far in the future, you'll gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into an answer." You rise in body or spirit. We'll close in song.
Before we sing, don't clap yet, I'll tell you when to clap. I want to give another huge thanks to our band today. The best part about all of this is that I just said, hey, Connie, do you want to play the fiddle? And Connie then created a band, picked all of the tunes, and shaped the whole service and how it was going to go. So let's have a big round of applause. Thank you so much, Connie. So to Connie, to Rob, to Amy, to Becky, to Elizabeth, who you haven't heard yet but is going to play the postlude, we're just so blessed to have so many fantastic musicians in this congregation. If you like holding hands with people, now would be a great moment. But if you don't like holding hands, that's okay too.